Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Selena from Wholeness Campaign, and today I'm going to be answering the question of why nausea during pregnancy. I feel like if this was a question for why nausea in general, this would be a totally different answer because there's a lot of reasons why someone could experience any kind of nausea in general. Most of the time it does have something to do with a microbiome imbalance. However, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm going to kind of focus in on pregnancy because I feel like this is a topic that I dug for, and it took me so long to find real answers. And so, a little backstory, I am expecting my first baby, and I experienced slight nausea in the beginning of my pregnancy. Nothing crazy. I would say it was pretty mild, but it was nausea nonetheless, and it was like prolonged throughout my first trimester of pregnancy. I dug, you guys, and I mean I literally dug so long for answers to why nausea in pregnancy, and I just wanted to really understand my body. I wanted to understand what was going on so that I could support my body the best. And I think so many times we just associate things with hormones and we don't really think about the kind of impact we can have in our lifestyle. And so I was asking some of those deeper questions, and I did end up finding a lot of answers and a lot of things that really did work. I'm going to start off with the reasons that I think are pretty conventional, that most people will know, that a Google search might tell you. And then I'm going to kind of go into some of these deeper things that I've heard different naturopathic doctors talk about, Dr. Natasha's mentioned before, and I've also seen different blogs about, and I wanted to kind of just throw those out there in case any of those may be helpful to you if you are in that spot, or maybe if you are just experiencing nausea in general. Some of these things can be good areas to maybe tackle next. So the first and foremost, the most common answer that anyone will get is because of hormones. Now, I do think this is probably accurate, although I don't fully think that most people understand what the trickle effect of hormones causing nausea actually is. And the reality is that people experience pretty relatively similar levels of this hormone in their body, but it can affect one person or another completely differently. I know that this is not the only factor, but it definitely is one of the factors and something that I do think about. Now, the second thing you're going to find online is hunger. And people will say that if you are experiencing nausea in pregnancy, especially that first trimester, you're going to want to eat more frequently, smaller meals, because the bigger meals can cause just this bloating, icky feeling that can make the nausea worse. And hunger can make nausea even worse because your body's just basically screaming to feed this growing child. Again, another common thing that people will say. The next, probably most common thing that I've heard out there is this idea of protein deficiency. And so I've heard and seen pregnancies through different vloggers here on YouTube and online that were absolutely terrible until they realized that they just were not getting enough protein. Vegans tend to experience this a lot more because they're just generally not getting as much protein as people who are eating meat. And protein deficiency has been known to lead to a host of different birth defects, as well as just making a totally miserable experience. I watched this one Instagram person that maybe I'll link in the description talk about her twin pregnancy and how she was just encouraged to kind of eat whatever she wanted and not think about nutrition really at all until she came to America, where she was planning to give birth, and all the doctors looked at her diet just completely stunned that she wasn't being told to eat more protein. She then started eating more protein, and after having a miserable, I mean literally she explained it as drop dead miserable pregnancy up until that point, she realized that she just wasn't feeding herself what she needed to be able to feel better. And so the rest of her pregnancy from that point on was remarkably different from the first part of her pregnancy. So protein does play a big impact. I feel like you'll see this a lot if you are studying different kind of birthing techniques like the Bradley method. They talk a lot about how protein can really, really make a difference for just the nutrition of the mother and the health of the growing baby, and that the mother will feel it way more, and it can actually impact how easy a birth is if there's not enough protein. Now, you guys know that I'm passionate about gut health, that it has made a huge difference in my life. to heal and seal my leaky gut and really go on the GAPS diet and take it seriously. But I truly do believe, and a lot of the research that I was seeing was also confirming this, that the state of your gut microbiome, whether someone is having kind of more extreme gut dysbiosis, can make pregnancy so much worse than if the person's gut was healed and sealed and healthy and strong. That being said, it's a little bit less of a common thing that you'll hear people say, and it is a tricky thing because when people get pregnant, it's not necessarily recommended that they go on some kind of really strong detoxing protocol, especially like GAPS can be. It is really more recommended that you don't go on intro, but that you're on full GAPS at the very least. But even GAPS at all can cause so much detox that it becomes tricky to heal your gut once you already are pregnant if you didn't have any kind of baseline for it before. That can actually, trying to heal your gut can actually sometimes make you feel worse. If you've seen any other videos on my channel of detox reactions and how it really doesn't always look like a linear path upward. Sometimes it can make you feel trashier before it makes you feel better. If you're experiencing any kind of nausea in pregnancy, sometimes if you're not careful and if you are diving headfirst into nutrition and all of this learning right after learning you're pregnant, it can cause these detox reactions that make these symptoms of pregnancy a lot worse. So that's not to say that you should throw them all out the window and wait and never do anything nourishing, especially when you're pregnant. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you got to be sensitive with your body because it's in a totally different kind of state than it would be when you're not pregnant. Now, another point on that note is I've actually heard that this morning sickness, this nausea that people experience in pregnancy, can actually be due to your body essentially detoxing to be able to protect the baby from toxins. So it's a very pivotal point in your baby's life when this morning sickness is the most common, which is that first trimester. This baby is developing a nervous system, it's developing, a heart and all of its cardiovascular system, its skin, all of it. And this is a really pivotal time of growth for this little baby that is starting out as like a seed and gonna eventually, make it to the size of an apple in that first trimester. So more holistic approaches have said that this nausea is actually your body doing an extra dose of cleaning. Basically, that nausea and vomiting in general is a way that your body purges toxins, and so having and experiencing that is your body's way of basically trying to get rid of toxic burden so that it doesn't affect the baby. And I think that's kind of an intuitive way to think about it, because your body is always doing what is best for the baby when you're pregnant. And even though it's not the most comfortable thing, it's interesting that this idea is essentially saying that it's really there to help your baby. So it can give you a little bit of perspective shift when you're experiencing some of this kind of more extreme forms of, essentially detox. Vomiting is a very classic detox reaction. I've said this at times in my channel, but there's a reason why people vomit when they have food poisoning, because their body's actually trying to get it out. It's a way that your body protects you against infection, against pathogenic bacteria overgrowing, and if you're not working with your body nutritionally, then this nausea and vomiting can be way worse than what it necessarily has to be. Something to note is that I've had friends who've been pregnant multiple times, and as they've been on their healing journey, their pregnancies have gotten a lot easier as time has gone on, which I just think is super interesting, because most mainstream doctors will tell you that it's just totally up to chance and it's, you can't control any of it. And I don't think that's actually always the case. I think you have a level of control over your body, over how good you feel in pregnancy. Now, a couple other things that I found as I was doing research, which are super interesting to me, and something I actually took note of, because I didn't learn this when I was in my first trimester, but I learned it now researching this to talk to you guys, is that magnesium deficiency can actually cause that morning sickness. And people who supplement magnesium apparently show decreased rates of morning sickness. Magnesium, I've talked about it in another video, and I'll talk about it again, is one of the most supportive things you can add into your diet when you're pregnant, when you're expecting, whether it's through food, whether it's through supplementing, or whether it's through just putting it topically on your skin, whatever you can tolerate. I would encourage you to get as much of it in as possible. Talk to your doctor, but most of the time they're going to say that that's totally fine. Magnesium is really supportive during pregnancy for a lot of different things, but apparently nausea too. I did supplement magnesium all throughout my first trimester, and I will say my nausea was really not terrible. It's not what people describe. It wasn't what people, like, I definitely had it to a degree, but it was not what I was afraid was going to happen. So not to say that that's the only factor, but it obviously apparently is a factor. And now the last thing I found that I thought was interesting too is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, but it's that extreme, there's this like diagnosis that doctors will give if you are experiencing basically like extreme and uncontrollable vomiting during that first trimester, that it becomes almost like unsafe because you are losing so much fluid and you end up really dehydrated because you're just vomiting constantly. Hypermesis gravidarum. Yeah. I read a blog post about somebody who had a friend who experienced this, and she researched and found that this could be due to an overgrowth of the H. pylori. Again, probably not saying that right, but it's basically a pathogenic form of bacteria that can overgrow in your gut, which again, it's this kind of idea of this gut imbalance, this overgrowth of something pathogenic causing this kind of extreme nausea and vomiting. This is again where those fermented brines really come into play. Be gentle during pregnancy, but it's really interesting that, yeah, that microbiome really does have an effect. This also kind of goes along with this theory that yeast overgrows when you're pregnant. It's also your body's way of protecting you from metals, contaminants, protecting that baby from all those contaminants and metals. And so it'll overgrow, like I've said here, it's kind of like a jelly donut, like the contaminant is like at the center, and this yeast or pathogenic bacteria will overgrow around that contaminant, whether it's a metal or a toxin or whatever. And that yeast can cause symptoms. And I think what most doctors get wrong is just to kind of control the yeast by not feeding it. But if you never remove the contaminant itself, then the yeast still has a reason to be there. And again, it is to protect you, so it will just come right back. It basically apparently grows even more when you are pregnant to protect your baby from those contaminants and those metals and stuff like that that may still be in your body. We live in a very contaminated world, so yeast overgrowth is common, and vomiting is a very common symptom of yeast overgrowth. Okay, I feel like I've yapped on for a while, but thank you guys all for watching. If you got any value out of this video, please comment below and subscribe. It is my passion to walk alongside people as they heal and grow. It inspires me and hopefully brings encouragement to you. Thanks for watching.